Welcome to Random But Memorable, a podcast from 1Password. I'm Rue, head of password manager development.
I'm Matt Davey, 1Password's chief experience officer.
I'm Sarah, one of the founders at 1Password.
I'm Anna, the producer behind the show.
And we're the hosts behind Random But Memorable. Together, we offer up bi-weekly security advice, interview special guests from the cybersecurity community, and round up the latest security news in Watchtower Weekly. Plus, we may even play a silly security game or two. So sit back and enjoy the show.
Is Anna here?
Is Anna here, but in the background?
Anna, are you here?
Here but not here?
Oh, don't do that.
No, don't do that. Lurking in the corner.
You can be here without showing us you're here?
Big old lurker.
No, you're invisible.
We didn't see you join until you hit the record button.
No, we literally cannot.
Because you're producer mode, you're not part of the show.
You didn't realize that you were stealth. Maybe you were just shouting out and it didn't even...
Yeah.
Nobody puts baby in the corner.
Yeah. Baby puts herself in the corner. Anyway, today's episode will be a photography-focused podcast because Anna and I need to have the chat that we didn't have this weekend. Hope we're all ready.
Should we, though? Have you seen the new landing page for the Random But Memorable podcast on the community site?
What?
Hold on.
Hang on.
If you go to onepassword.community.
Oh, it's got a fun domain, right?
Onepassword.community.
Yeah, that's a really nice domain.
We aim to please.
Oh, look at that. It's on the homepage.
All right, look at this. We got a whole thing.
Oh.
We're super excited by the new community. It's got a lot of really great things. We've got some really cool stuff coming. But yeah, we've got the whole thing there. And Random But Memorable now has a home there. So you can just go to the community, learn some things, take a tutorial, do a couple things, or just listen to the podcast while you're there.
I just clicked the Become a Champion button. If I don't get this rubber stamped, I'm going to be real upset.
It's a rigorous process. We'll see what we can do.
I'm liking the post.
Yeah, it's like a blog post.
It's a transcription
really
of you talking. You can't call it really good.
Wait, what? Oh, look at that. It is a transcription. I just saw that there was a lot of text.
Oh, I just read it and thought really intelligent people were talking about each other. And then I thought, oh, wow, look at this good-looking chap. Who's he?
Look at this good-looking chap.
It is really good, though.
We're basically completely distracted now by just browsing through this site. I
know, it's really good.
I'm telling you, this community site has a lot of stuff. So hopefully, I think our listeners will really like what they can find at onepassword.community and know that, we just launched it 6 weeks ago. And we've got way more coming to really build it all out. So, help for whatever it is you're doing. You can find assistance, help, resources, and it's just going to get better. So super excited.
How fun.
I like it.
Yeah.
I have read and agreed to the terms of service. I do use 1Password for business.
Oh my God. Are you registering for the community live on the podcast?
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Registration complete. Good. My username was still available. All right. I got to upload one of my many headshots.
So you've managed to get the username absolute_Muppet.
You know what? My headshot would make you think that that's what I got. So yes. Before we get into Watchtower Weekly, I have to talk about the guest we have coming up on the show today. Buckle up for this one because this might be my favorite interview we've ever done, if I'm allowed to have favorites.
Buckle up.
Buckle up. That's right. I'm assuming you're in the car listening to this right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're getting on the highway, folks. Be ready.
I had the absolute pleasure of spending some time with Ralph Echemendia. Ralph has had an unbelievable journey into cybersecurity, which only got more fascinating as he became a technical supervisor for many huge record labels and Hollywood studios. He's worked on the set of some huge movies to make sure hacking and technical aspects are portrayed accurately on screen. He's also worked with world-renowned artists when they've had albums leaked. I could have listened to his wild stories and countless anecdotes for hours, so I just know we're all going to love this one as much as I did.
Hang on, why did you get to talk to Ralph?
Because
this sounds like a brilliant conversation.
It was so good. I think we're best friends now.
Does that mean you just ring him up unannounced?
Yes.
Right.
Like I do to you. Exactly.
Okay, let's begin our show, as we always do, with some Watchtower Weekly, of course named in honor of 1Password's Watchtower feature. But here on the podcast, we like to highlight and comment on some of the latest security news from the last couple of weeks. So first up, we have this story. Medusa ransomware affiliate tried triple extortion scam up from the usual double demand. So this one's from the Register. Okay, so a crook who distributes the Medusa ransomware tried to make a victim cough up 3 payments instead of the usual 2, according to the government advisory on how to defend against malware. Medusa is a globe-spanning ransomware-as-a-service operation that recruits third-party affiliates to plant ransomware and negotiate with its victims once it's encrypted data. What an awful set of people. InfoSec agencies prefer to call those affiliates Medusa actors. They're also sometimes labeled as initial access brokers, IABs. Their job is to crack victims' IT defenses so that systems can be infected. Whatever you call these third-party entities, they often attack with credential-stealing phishing campaigns or by exploiting unpatched software bugs. Once Medusa's bad actors gets their ransomware running, they use a double extortion strategy that sees them demand payments to decrypt the scrambled data and to prevent its release. Even orgs that have a good ransomware recovery regime may consider paying to prevent the release of their stolen data, given the unpleasant consequences that follow genuine information leaks. So Medusa actors also set a deadline for victims to pay ransoms and will provide a countdown timer that makes it plain when stolen information will be sprayed across the internet. If victims cough up sometimes up to $10,000 in cryptocurrency, the criminals push the deadline forward by 24 hours. A new report reveals one Medusa actor has taken things up a step. The report states that FBI investigations identified that after paying the ransom, one victim was contacted by a separate Medusa actor who claimed the negotiator had stolen the ransom amount already paid. The separate actor, apparently there's no honor amongst thieves. Who'd have thought it? The separate actor then requested half of the payment to be made again to provide the true decryptor. The advisory sometimes described this incident as potentially indicating a triple extortion scheme. This is not good news because it suggests that victims' details are being shared among multiple Medusa actors. But it does not necessarily indicate a lack of honor among thieves. It kind of does. Because Medusa's operators pay the actors it recruits between $100 and $1 million to work exclusively with their ransomware as a service crew. The investment pays off because affiliate actors share ransomware payments with Medusa's developers. Demanding more ransom therefore pays off for everyone in the Medusa system. Another item of news in the recent advisory is that of February 2025, Medusa has claimed at least 300 victims from a variety of critical infrastructure sectors with affected industries including medical, education, legal, insurance, technology and manufacturing. Just last month, Medusa affiliates infected HCRG Care Group, a UK-based private health and social care provider, and demanded $2 million, £1.5 million, to keep the stolen information under wraps. Oh.
It's complicated and gross. Like, stop stealing people's money. Don't do it.
Yeah, this one's pretty grim.
Not money, really. I guess it's their data, right? Like, this gets complicated. This is where, like, if there's a trap to fall into, once I'm in this, I'm stuck. I'm in it forever. I'm never getting out. Like, it's too complicated for me. I need good old fashioned, I locked your software, here's your money, you can have it back. Like, I don't know, it reeks of like crime boss, like multi-level mailing scheme, pyramid work, like, let me sell you some Tupperware type deal. Like, it's...
I wonder whether this like actually gets dealt with from internal to Medusa, right? Like, because there's got to be, like, this is a business at this point. Like, yes, it's a criminal organization, but this is like The Sopranos, but someone under Tony Soprano is messing about. Like, I feel like somewhere someone's going to sort this out. Because you want to believe that if you've paid this, that you're going to get the thing at the end. And if they keep messing about, no one's going to believe that, so no one's going to end up paying. Which is, of course, a good thing. We should not believe these people, but it's not good for them. All right. This next one, a developer guilty of using kill switch to sabotage employer's system. A software developer has been found guilty of sabotaging his ex-employer's systems by running custom malware and installing a kill switch after being demoted at the company. Davis Liu was a software developer for an Ohio company, reportedly Eaton Corp, from November 2007 to October 2019. There are global power management company that provides electrical, hydraulic, and mechanical solutions for various industries. And following a corporate restructuring in 2018, Lou lost responsibilities at his job and recently found guilty of sabotaging his employer's computer systems and networks with a custom malware and kill switch. The malicious activities included code that ran in an infinite loop, exhausting a production server's resources and eventually causing the system to crash and prevent user logins. These infinite loops were designed to exhaust Java threads by repeatedly generating new threads without proper termination. According to Lou's indictment, Lou also deleted co-workers' user profiles and implemented a kill switch that would lock all users out if his account in the company's Windows Active Directory was disabled. The kill switch code was named ISDL enabled in AD, was an abbreviation of Is Davis Lou enabled in Active Directory. The kill switch was automatically triggered when Lou was terminated on September 9th, 2019, causing thousands of employees to lose access to systems. This is wild.
This is crazy, yeah.
I was just going to say, I appreciate the simplicity of the name. Is DL enabled in AD? Like, straight up.
Yes.
Am I, like,
very good.
Sometimes they get all, like, you know, all this kind of stuff. And, yeah, like, this is just straight up, am I working here? Yes or no? Like,
yep.
If I'm not here, no one else is. Whoa. So, on the day he was directed to return his company laptop, Lou reportedly deleted encrypted data. The DOJ said internet search queries also revealed that Lou had been researching ways to elevate privileges, hide processes, and quickly delete files. Everybody always gets caught on what they Google after they do a crime. I don't understand. Right. The Department of Justice have also said that Lou's activities and system disruption cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. A jury convicted Lou of causing internal damage to protected computers, a charge that carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison.
Oh.
That's a long time.
That is a long time.
all I can think about as you're talking about the story is Dennis Nedry, Object White Rabbit. It's only just becoming more of a thing. And I think, you know, companies have to do what they can, but it's hard to know how to protect yourself against all this kind of stuff without making everything in the open. Yeah.
Yep. It is always one of my favorite things when news stories like this contain the fact that, like you said, Matt, like they web search the crime before they commit it. Like, best way to dispose of a body was found in this murderer's search history. It's really fantastic. All right, I think that's enough. That's enough news for the day. It is time to get into my chat with Ralph. We discuss his incredible journey into cybersecurity, his path to Hollywood, and we also touch on the amazing work he's doing with the music and film industry to protect the studios and labels. Not just the studios themselves, but protecting their creative property and their content, too. There's so many wild stories in here, and really, I think we only just scratched the surface, even getting into his time working on 2016's Snowden film. So let's get straight into it and drop it in here. Joining me today is Ralph Echemendia. Ralph, known as the Ethical Hacker, is a world-renowned cybersecurity expert with over 30 years of experience. He's provided training on hacking and other security information to corporations, including NASA and Google, delivered more than 50 keynotes, and worked as a technical supervisor in Hollywood on award-winning films and TV series like Snowden, Savages, Nerve, and Mr. Robot. He's now joined forces with some of the music industry and Hollywood's most influential names to provide production content protection. Ralph, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
You are one of I don't get to do this type of interview very often. You know, we interview a lot of interesting people on the show, but it's rare that I get to talk to someone who's been in the entertainment industry in the way that you have. This is going to be a fun one today.
It's been an interesting ride for sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about that journey a little bit. You've had an interesting path into cybersecurity. Can you start by sharing how you got your start in the industry?
I got my start in the industry before there was an industry. Was just a kid playing with a computer in the late 80s. Before there was any internet, before there was anything, I started with good old Commodore 64 nice. And trying to figure out what this thing would do. And BBSs, even before that, a little bit into ham radio, which really kind of led to playing with computers. And then in that process, I actually ended up at the ripe old age of about 18. I got a job at a public relations company, which I really didn't know what that meant, what public relations was, but as a secretary, as an administrative assistant, because at the time, it was the shift went from, your word processor machines to Word Perfect and DOS and computers. And because I knew how to use that's it. I got the job. And unbeknownst to me, that PR agency was handling, at the time, the split of Lexmark from IBM, the printer company. So we were doing the launch of Lexmark in Latin America. And that's the first time that I ever met really anyone else face to face, because at that point in time, we were hackers on BBSs, so I didn't really know, or, other than a friend who got me into computers in Miami, where I grew up. And so when that happened was the first time I flew to Colombia and Argentina and met IBM engineers who were setting up the presentation of these printers. And that started a conversation about how the protocol they were using didn't have any security. And the guys were looking at me like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you're the IBM engineer. Don't you know how this works? And he literally had no clue to what I was talking about. So I showed him, and I made the printers all print something obscene there for a minute just to make it funny. That led to them saying, hey, where do you work? And when I said, I'm a secretary over at the PR agency, he was like, why? He then, gave me the name of a recruiter, and the next place I worked was at Oracle.
Yeah, I have to imagine that in late 80s, early 90s, asking people, like, what's the security protocol around this stuff, when they're just trying to get things to connect and work.
That was basically it. He was like, he was saying to me, where do you work? And we don't even know how this stuff works that you just explained. And I said, well, at the time, I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't go to college. And he was like, that doesn't really matter. You know more than I do on this. And I said, well, but you work for IBM. Like, you need to have all those things for be able to even be seen. So he said, no, I'm going to give you the name of a recruiter and just do as he says. And I did. And the next job I got just about a few months later was working at Oracle. And I had no idea what Oracle was either. So all I know is I walked into an office that was an entire floor, now had access to big machines, Unix machines.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, you've got access to it as far as computer nerds are concerned. It's like you've got Ferraris and Lamborghinis to play with now. So,
Yeah.
But I had no idea what Oracle was. And at that point, Oracle was already, Microsoft and Oracle were the two biggest companies in the tech sector. So, yeah, and then it was from there that then digging around the Oracle network and also bringing up issues within Oracle and saying, hey, how come I can get access to source code sitting in London, but your guys from Latin America can't check their email here?
Right.
It was mind-blowing to me that just a lot of people didn't really know, and yet they were in the business. And I had no idea that there was a business, to be honest with you. That eventually became a more of security. And it was actually after Oracle, I ended up working for a hospital and then deploying the first medical charting system in the world outside of NASA. And it was there that I discovered some flaws in it and was sent to Arizona, where this piece of software was originally owned by Motorola. I went out there when, again, this wasn't even a business, right? There was this hacker subculture going on that I was a part of, but it had, terminology like responsible disclosure versus full disclosure. And this is one of those areas where I feel very strongly about with healthcare systems, because if you affect any of this stuff, it's going to kill somebody. Yeah. So the funny thing was, after this trip, which my title at the hospital was point of care system administrator. And then I came back from the trip and I was called into a meeting with, the executives at the hospital. I said, well, I changed your title, give you a raise, and you're officially now the security officer. And that was the first time the word security came up. And this is around the time now that firewalls are coming out and the internet is being used. And I said, security officer. Well, that sounds like the same title of the guy at the front door with a gun. Do I get an outfit and a gun, a special hat or something? And they're like, no, different kind of security officer. So at that point was the first time that I even heard that word being used within the industry. And that's how it began. From there, I ended up connecting with some other friends in the hacking world and then decided to write a hacking class, a penetration testing class, applied penetration testing, it was called. And in that process, it sort of became this, there was very few of those around at the time. And it became sort of the standard than other certifications and certification classes were based on. And then I went into training and did many years of training.
Wow. I have to imagine it was a little daunting to be given that title at a time when so much of it is still, you're like kind of figuring it out as you go. Like you're building this role. I now have to live up to this title. That must have been a little daunting.
It was, because then it was like, okay, am I just responsible for my system, or now we're responsible for the whole hospital and every other system in here?
Yeah.
It was in that process that, and again, this took a matter of a couple of years. Now we're getting into 92, 93 in that area. And in between all that, that's the funny thing about it. I had a second job. I was in Miami and had somebody who basically called me up and said, I need you to fix a computer for, $200. It's Windows, it's having issues. Yeah. And I went to this office. This guy sat me in front of another computer and said, can you tell me what that is? And then I typed up, okay, this is a Unix system, an HPUX system. And he was like, you're hired. I said, well, I'm not looking for a job. I'm good. I have a very nice job at the hospital and I'm not looking for a job. And he was like, oh, but you don't understand this. We just got this big contract for the United Nations. The job was basically the system administrator for the UN missions web server. So all email, all websites for the United Nations missions. I ran for a while. That turned into a side gig for 2.5 years while I worked at the hospital. I got to go to New York, had a UN badge and everything. Got to be one of the few people that could be in a UN data center while still working at the hospital. And it was after that I realized, why don't I write a class about how you test this stuff? And then went heavy into more of that. And that led to consulting, right? Because at the end of the day, you can go take a training class, but you're not going to walk out of there an expert necessarily. So,
yeah.
And then that put me in all kinds of different industries.
Was that the path to Hollywood then?
It was kind of, yeah, training was big for me for several years. I was, for a good 3-4 years, I was doing 3 weeks a month. They were called boot camp style classes. So 3 weeks a month, every month for 3.5 years without stopping. And every week was a different city, including every government agency you can imagine in the U.S.
Wow.
Every major corporation was coming through these classes. And so, of course, from a lot of those contacts that I made there, eventually I ended up working at a company called Terramark, which is, again, like I said, a big data center company. And in the middle of that, I'll tell you how the transition happened to Hollywood. In between that time, one thing I failed to mention was another little side gig I had was a ticketing company in Miami. And we did music festivals. So always around the creative types and the arts, especially around music. And so now I was at Terramark and I got called in and they said, look, we work with this company who does private intelligence on a global scale. And they have a client through the record label. We need you to go to Detroit and work on this case as an investigator. And I said, Detroit? It's a rapper from Detroit. So I'm like, a rapper from Detroit? There's only 2 rappers I know from Detroit. And one of them is named Eminem. Is that Eminem? And they're like, yes, it's Eminem. So I now was in Detroit and I'm working on his leak. A lot of that had to do with, hey, you kind of get along well in the room with the artist type. The rest of the crew was very much, ex-law enforcement, investigators type. And so I did manage to get more out of them when investigating these cases than the ex-law enforcement guys did, because they felt more at ease. And so not long after that had me going already. There were other cases that I was working on in entertainment that had me going to LA a lot. I was spending more time in LA than I was in Miami. And shortly after that, Twilight Breaking Dawn got hacked. And I was handling the Twilight case. So now I'm working almost exclusively with creatives. And of course, if you're in LA, almost the great majority of people there are obviously either a writer, want to be an actor, a musician, want to be famous. Yeah. And here I was, had no interest in any of it as far as as that was concerned. But I love working with these people. And I realized from my experience with the Twilight case that there really was no cybersecurity at all, right? This is a production budget. There is no computer systems or an IT staff or any of that. That's all part of the camera department. And so I realized there is no security. And so I started focusing on working with studios and really sort of shedding light on this issue. And this is pre-Sony hack. This is, pre any of that. Yeah. And I was just running around town, did, some presentations at the House of Blues about this and, starting to get their attention, but they still really didn't know where this would come from as far as a budget, because production is not part of the studio budget. That's a very separate thing. And It took some time, but by that time, I ended up moving to LA. Interestingly enough, I was invited to speak at CAA, William Morris, and all these different places. And while I was talking about how to protect their industry, they were actually more interested in my stories than they were about protecting the industry. They wanted to know more about, so tell me more about these stories and tell me more about that. And then that was mostly a lot, of course, with writers and directors. And so that eventually led to meeting Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
And working on Savages. That was the first film that I was no longer an investigator because something went wrong. I was actually now the technical supervisor for the director. And I had no idea, excuse my language, but I had no idea what filmmaking process was or what it was like to be on a set or what the rules of engagement or how do you move or, any of that. But reporting directly to Oliver Stone, who's, a legend in filmmaking. So that was the first time that I had to really flip to being fully on the crew side of it. Right.
I feel like this is a theme for you, Ralph. You get put into these roles where you're like, well, now I got to figure out what the hell this means and what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Yeah. And it was especially interesting. And that's in general, right? Because penetration testing, even from the beginning, was very much that, right? You're dealing with a different environment every time. And you have to kind of figure out what the environment is and what you can do and where the holes are. And if there isn't any holes, how to make holes. So it was very much like that. But the big difference here, and I still enjoy it to this day, was that, this is people. I consider computers to be very easy. Computers do exactly what you tell them to do.
Yeah, exactly.
If they make a mistake, it's because you made a mistake. It's that simple. Here you're dealing with 300-400 people on a movie set, all of which I don't really know exactly what they do, and they don't know what I do. Just I have many funny stories from Savages all the way through to, all of these other productions I've worked on. But that intensified from there being some scenes that needed my help from an art direction perspective, from what should be on screen, from working with the writers to make sure it was realistic, but at the same time entertaining, to then working on Snowden, which was everything, it was from ground zero, all the way through. So it was like literally, I wouldn't say co-directing, but it was very close.
Yeah. Yeah. Because for a production like that, the accuracy is so important.
Yeah.
And so you being in seat really close to the director was critical to that success.
Yeah. And Oliver's great about that, The meaning of, I think this was one of the questions that we were discussing before we were talking about this podcast was, the meaning of what that technical supervisor term was. And I didn't know what that, that's, again, I don't know what a gaffer was. So, I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And it meant different things with different projects, to be honest with you, where with Savages, I didn't really have to work too much with the writer, where once we got into like Snowden or with Mr. Robot, there was a lot more of working with the writer before you even got into anything else, what would be on screen or anything else. It was just, what is the dialogue? What does the scene look like? And it was just very interesting to go through that process. And then, like I said, with Snowden, it was everything from wardrobe. It was going to pre-production meetings in Munich. So it was quite interesting. It meant different things on different productions.
What was your prep for Snowden like? What did you have to do? Did you meet him?
Actually, the funny thing about Snowden was that I worked on Savages with Oliver, and then we became very close friends. And for a period of time there, he was very interested in doing something in this world. He was already communicating quite a bit with Julian Assange. And, we were talking about all of these issues and privacy and the government and blah, 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 right? And he was very interested. And so I invited him to come out to DEF CON in Vegas with me. And he came out along with a crew. He had 2 or 3 writers with him, his producer. And for a good day there, it was cool. We could just walk around without nobody noticing. And then it became a few people noticing. But I got to give him the experience. Let's just put it that way. And and in that experience, I got a whole bunch of old hacker friends from across the world and from all kinds of different places and companies and governments. And in a room to have conversations with him. This is pre-Snowden happening. So Snowden hasn't happened yet. We met with Bill Binney, who is sort of one of the original whistleblowers of the NSA. And this was all happening at DEF CON, right? And so he knew he wanted to do something in that world. And I was translating everything for him because he'd have to be there and be like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And so we did that. And then, I don't know, it was a few months after that the Snowden disclosures first happened without the name Snowden attached. The first disclosures happened, and then the Snowden name attached to it. And very quickly after that, then he came to me and said, Ralph, we're going to make this movie, Snowden. Securing the legal rights to make it happen and everything else. But, we're going to go to Russia to meet with Snowden. Another writer who I know from the DEF CON trip, he was Karen Fitzgerald, who wrote the movie with Oliver. We discussed going to Russia, and I said, no, I'm not going to Russia. And in fact, I have no direct need to speak to Snowden. I have too many friends on all sides of this thing. So I prefer this is just a movie. So you guys go, make your notes, as you're a great note taker, Oliver, and come back and tell me what you need. And then Kieran and I will sit down and write the scenes out. And there was a lot. I think they met 3 or 4 times, but there was a lot of notes, and there was a lot of scenes that they wanted to create that Snowden wouldn't tell them enough information. So it was left on me to come up with the entire thing based on very little information. For example, there's one scene where Snowden is taking this test in the movie, and in fact, I make a little cameo. I'm walking through, making sure nobody's cheating. And he said, I had to take this test. You had X amount of time to do the test. I forgot what it was, 5 hours or something. And I did it in 45 minutes. And of course, this is all the notes I had. Okay, what was the test about? Can't tell you that. So there was a lot of can't tell you that's in the meetings between Oliver and Snowden.
Yeah.
And so it was left up to me to figure out, okay, what would that be? And so that whole thing was something that I had to come up with, and then the writer would come up with how to make it entertaining.
Yeah. There's a lot of creative license, obviously, involved there. And because of the type of production, you still want to make sure that that's accurate. So I'm sure that this whole time you're trying to balance the creativity and the entertainment value with some level of accuracy so that people
exactly
who do know aren't just calling bull on this film being wow, that's kind of nonsense.
Exactly. So for me, it was okay, what's the hardest test I know that takes a long time to do within the tech sector? And it was a Cisco exam, right? And then once we came up with, okay, well, that's the concept. Then it was okay, well, then how is he going to do it in 45 minutes as opposed to 5 hours? So I had to come up with, well, what would I do to make it so that, once the instructor screws everything up, I can somehow get back to it within a very short period of time without rebuilding the entire thing again.
Yeah. So you've also worked on Mr. Robot, which feels like it's on sort of another spectrum in terms of now it's pure entertainment value. There's not, it doesn't have to be based in a real story, but you still want to create some realism. Again, you don't want to be.
Yeah. And, Mr. Robot was, believe it or not, Mr. Robot was going on at the same time as we were doing Snowden. So in the early development stages of Snowden is when I was approached about Mr. Robot. And Sam, who wrote Mr. Robot, they had already filmed the first episode. So when they contacted me, they sent me the first episode, and I was impressed.
That's cool.
I was like, wow, okay, this finally somebody got it right.
That's awesome.
And then that's what led to the other discussions and actually me doing a talk at Anonymous Content and produced the show. And it was from those initial discussions that they got a great majority of what then turned into basically episodes 2 through 5. After 5, I was no longer involved. I was on other projects already too. And it was also from a creative writing perspective, going in a different direction than what I thought. The first few episodes were very much focused on the technicalities of how you would make something happen, like make debt go away. All of the computers that have that kind of information.
Yeah.
And all of those little details, then it started becoming a little bit more heady. And we were in full-blown production of Snowden at that point, and post-production. Now, that's the other thing I'll tell you. For Snowden, I wasn't just the technical supervisor. I also provided all the back-end systems for how all communications associated to the assets, meaning the film itself, because it was the first digital movie that Oliver had filmed digitally.
Whoa. So
basically, the way that we would move all of the data around to all of the different people involved, that was also my responsibility to run those systems.
That's wild. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of responsibility on one film with a couple different roles to play.
So that was enough, And then, of course, everything that was on screen, which that was also interesting with for example, in Savages and in most films, what you see on the computer screens is actually done in post-production. There's only a green screen on there, and then they fill that stuff in later. And that's it, a great majority of film. In Snowden, he wanted that to be reactive. He wanted the actors to have to type in and that the screens would have to react and that the camera would actually capture what's on screen. And because of the way Hollywood works with legal clearances and whatnot, we couldn't use actual operating systems. So we can't use Windows, we can't use Linux, can't use Mac OS on screen without getting legal clearance. And that's going to take too long because we're moving too fast. So we had to we hired a programmer out of Berlin who actually programmed what those screens would look like, and then had to program that they were reactive. So if the actor was typing and hit backspace, it would backspace, so
Jeez.
it was quite interesting. And then, again, generally you have, a scene where you have somebody on 4 screens. In the old, the way we've done it before, you can move a screen to another screen or whatever. But in this case, if all of a sudden, Oliver, the director of photography, decided we're going to shoot it this way, and we need that screen to be on this screen, well, that took reprogramming it in real time and coming back, and it was an experience. I'll tell you that.
That's wild. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a lot about like accuracy and your role in accuracy, but as a consumer of media, both of us being in the tech industry, the inaccurate things jump out at us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty easily. What's your viewpoint? Is there any real world implications of inaccuracies in this stuff, or is it more just like...
Oh, it's a great majority of Hollywood films that portray hacking are largely inaccurate. From hackers in every way to many, many, many other movies, right? That's why I thought, Mr. Robot was the first that I saw, first episode that was accurate from the get-go, and everything in it was accurate, So that excited me. But there is a bit of a toss-up between accuracy and entertainment. And for example, Sam, the writer on Mr. Robot, initially the reason we contacted him, he was having a bit of an issue with the guy he was using in New York because he was too engineering focused. He thought it was too very important that it had this and this and this. And again, it's not his call, right? And I understood that from working with Oliver already. It's your movie, not mine. And there is some things you have to go up. So I'll give you an example of one where I had to say, okay, Oliver, you're right, go with it. In Snowden, there's a scene where he's copying everything to his drive that he ends up walking out of there with, right? Which is the files that were later released. And typically is a Windows computer he's on. And if you copy 100 files at the same time, select all, and drag and drop them to a folder, what happens is they stack up like this. Yeah. Right? That's what really happens on Windows. Well, Oliver didn't like that. It's too boring for the screen because it's going to be shown on screen. So he wanted it to pop up like this. And we had a little bit of a fight there for a while about whether or not it should pop up like this or whether it should be the way it actually is on a computer. And in the end, I was like, okay, you are right. It is more visual. If it pop up all over the screen, it's a lot more dramatic that way. And that's how we left it. And sure enough, as soon as the movie was released, somebody had to call, hey, well, that's not accurate, And it was like, but that's the tech nerd world. I remember watching The Matrix during a DEF CON when it had just been released. And, when they put that SSH exploit on screen, that happens for half a second in The Matrix.
Yeah.
And the whole place was like, wow, right? So it matters to us. Does it matter to the storyline? That's a different thing. And does it, so there is a bit of a toss-up. It's just, Hollywood is just so generally so bad.
Yeah.
So just how they even portray hackers. We're all wearing hoodies, which I'm not sure it's necessary because we're on a computer. There's no need to wear it to hide. Okay. At least not physically, but, working on other projects like Nerve, which was very closely working with multiple writers, but where the whole idea was we're coming up with an app.
Yeah.
Pretend we're actually writing an app that's a truth and dare type of app. And that we're going to, they're writing the rest of this scene around the concepts of how we would write an app that would allow for anonymity if you were doing this and if you were doing that. And then after all of that, the final writer, because they had some issues with writers along the way, said, okay, I need you to tell me how to make everybody no longer anonymous. After all the way working through this project was that there would be no way to remove people's anonymity. The last writer was like, no, we need to remove people's anonymity. How would we do that?
Oh my God.
So, okay, switch to the hacker brain again. Okay, how would we do that? And then he worked it into the story, and I think it worked out great.
That's cool. All right, I want to switch gears slightly to talk about protecting the industry. So we live in an age of leaks, some intentional, some are not. You talked about the Sony hack earlier. Do you see unique challenges these days with record labels and TV and studios in terms of piracy and exposure and stuff like that? And how are these things viewed by the studios these days?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, the studios, look, I was preaching in LA 12 years ago, 13 years ago about how much of an issue they had, but they didn't see it and they didn't understand it. They understood one thing: piracy. Now, when you say piracy, you're talking about post-production. You're talking about distribution issues.
Yeah.
You're not talking about a leak. Okay, a leak, at least most people think that a leak is that something got out before it was supposed to. This is already out stuff, and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars, right, of both the recording industry and the film industry on piracy. But pre-release protection, they really spent nothing. There was very few things that I found that they were spending any real focus there, because again, they didn't know where this budget should come from, right? Those were the biggest issues I had to talk with studios and directors and whatnot. Music was already screwed. Unless you were Eminem, you know what I mean? Unless you were in that top 1% where the label is, they got to do something if there's a leak.
Yeah.
Right? There's not a heck of a lot you can do. There's just not. And the biggest problem is that it's on everybody's personal devices. This is the same thing with film, I was realizing. Everybody's using their personal devices. And if it's not a personal device, it's a leased device. I can't tell you how many cases I handled where leased movie equipment went back to the leasing company with content on it.
Oh.
Right? So it's a problem. Now, there was certain studios which were doing very tight security. There was actually one. Disney. Disney had, again, they didn't have a security department specifically for production per se, but they did have guidelines that you had to meet, pen tests that had to be done and provided if you wanted to be a service provider to Disney, where most of the other studios had no such thing, right? And so what did it take? Well, I think the Sony hack was a major eye-opener for them. And that wasn't even a production hack.
Yeah.
By that time, you had films that had been leaked in different stages, in pre, post, and so on. But they didn't really know how to financially equate the potential losses. And they still don't, to be quite honest. I've had this conversation too, which is when it comes to the issue of piracy. What tells you that somebody who downloaded the movie for free or streamed the movie for free would ever pay for it? Like, really, what made you think that you can say we've lost this many, because there really is no data to support any of that, right? And in music, what happened was those people who said, i.e., for example, Metallica, who was very against the Napster and file share and all this sharing stuff, well, they lost fans. And those who were like, I'm not going to say anything. If anything, I'm going to embrace it. They got fans. And at the end of the day, fans pay.
Right.
They just pay because they want to pay. So film is different, right? And what was happening in Hollywood was a little bit different because it was going straight to streaming. It kind of somewhat, there was a short, brief period of downloading and these leaks and whatnot. So pre-production security or pre-release, pre-distribution was almost non-existent. When the Sony thing happened, which again was not about a specific production, even though they said that it was because of the interview, the movie about the North Korean thing.
Yeah.
Even though that's what they claimed, how come that movie, there was no leaks associated to that movie? How come nobody associated to that movie, including the director or the actors, were ever attacked or hacked? It was Sony specifically.
Yeah.
So, I've always said that was an inside job with the help of some outsiders. And that's, of course, not what the FBI and the government said. But that's what I've said, and many other experts agree. But once that happened, all of a sudden now they realize, okay, we have to reshift how we budget when it comes to cybersecurity issues. And then the rest of the industry, the Fox and the 20th Centuries and many of the other studios also started looking into it. Now you have a bit of that. It's still not entirely clear. It's sort of, way I explained it was, if you look at a movie from, let's say, 15 years ago, there was no such thing. When you look at the credits roll, you won't see a data wrangler. You won't see a DIT because they didn't exist. There was no data wrangling and there was no digital imaging technologist who's doing anything on the fly.
Yeah.
Well, that's my belief with film, and you still don't quite see it today, is that there's a title that needs to go there, who is the sort of cybersecurity person on the film. And that still hasn't happened. And I don't mean a technical supervisor. I mean somebody responsible for the actual assets, since the assets are digital.
Right. What's the overlap in your mind between the cybersecurity aspect, like the actual like technical protections around the data, compared to just the sheer volume of people working on a production? And from an outsider's point of view, it seems like a movie production is a fairly porous environment with lots of people coming and going all the time.
It's incredibly difficult to really secure a production like that, because the other thing is, you can tell these people to do something, and it doesn't mean that they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Especially if it isn't coming from the director. That's why I had a lot of luck in working with Oliver, right? On those productions, that made it a lot easier for certain things to get done. It's just not going to get done. You can tell everybody, okay, we all have to use this email now. They're not going to use this email now. Okay. They're still going to be sending, the wardrobe department is taking pictures of the actor in wardrobe, and then it's on their mobile phone.
Yeah.
Right. So you have hundreds of people all using, like I said, personal devices and or lease devices. And it's very difficult to do.
Are there studios that you think are doing it really well today, balancing the security with the speed of production?
Well, balancing is an interesting word to use. Like I said, Disney is one that is extremely tight. Is it balancing? Well, it depends, because, for example, I know a lot of people in visual effects departments, companies that do visual effects. If you can't meet Disney standards because they don't have the IT infrastructure and security infrastructure behind that to be able to meet Disney's requirements, then you can't work with Disney. And that is a 6-figure number.
Right.
To be able to have what Disney's requiring, that's on the visual effects company to do before they get the contract. So
yeah,
many visual effects companies can't work with Disney because they're not going to spend, $200,000-$300,000 to be able to meet Disney's requirements. So is it a balance? I guess that all depends, because once we get back to the issue, having the right creative people, the right creative team, security always gets in the way.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah. So, Ralph, where do you see your career going next?
Well, I have been, heavily involved, especially over the last few years, because of many things I've learned in Hollywood, because of doing many cases for high-profile individuals. And in that process, I've also ended up securing or dealing with privacy and reputation management issues of high net worth families. Not necessarily high profile, but high net worth. And so I've been doing a lot of that, as well as actually doing a lot more on the production side. I'm producing and executive producing a couple of different pieces of content now. And I'm having a lot of fun doing that. And interestingly enough, they're not really around hacking. They're more around music stories.
Nice.
So, I've done a lot of work for hip hop artists and for rock artists and for all kinds of on the cybersecurity side, but that has led me into more of the storytelling of where music comes from.
That's really cool.
So certainly not keyboard cowboying as much as I used to anymore, but advising the executives and the founding teams on what they need to be doing, especially when these type of applications cross borders, dealt a lot with European laws and U.S. laws, and just what the issues are in compliance around the world.
That's really cool. It's that you have had an incredibly interesting journey. It's really fun to hear about, and I think we only scratched the surface today.
It really has been, man. I mean, I could not imagine any of this having happened when I was at Oracle or at the hospital or any of that.
Yeah.
It would have been wild, and you can only imagine. I've got thousands of the craziest stories with people who are very famous or who are like that. I have to go, how the hell did this happen? Like how did I end up here? I didn't end up in this situation.
Yeah. Ralph, this has been a really fun conversation that I also feel was way too short. Can you tell people where they can go if they want to learn a little bit more about you and the kind of stuff you do and things like that?
I'm out there on all the socials and such. TheEthicalHacker.net is the website. There's, again, the TED Talk. There's a YouTube channel of The Ethical Hacker as well, and Instagram and all these things. But I don't do too much on socials these days. It tends to be very handpicked when I do even keynotes and whatnot. So, yeah. I'm easy to find and easy to reach, and I respond.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Ralph, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I appreciate you, man.
Incredible. And if you enjoyed that interview, took something from it, or want to discuss anything that we've talked about on today's show, you can now head over to onepassword.community. There's a dedicated page for Random But Memorable with a new comment form, which we'll also include in the show notes.
All right, let's close up the show today with our newest, loosely linked to security game, Alternative Security Questions. And apparently, it's time to play the jingle.
It's Alternative Security Questions, the game show that answers the questions that no one asked for. When your mother's maiden name just won't do, and your first pet's getting boring too, we've got new ones for you. Like, what's the ugliest animal at the zoo? What was your ex-girlfriend's favorite shampoo? It's Alternative Security Questions, the game show that answers the questions that no one asked for.
Generic security questions are overused, and as we've said many times before, not very secure if you're answering them truthfully. So, here we get to suggest some alternative security questions with less predictable answers. This week, Rue and Sarah will create fake answers to obscure questions. As the host, I will award made-up points based on comedy or creativity. I must also try and detect if others' answers were real or not. So we play 3 rounds and answer 3 alternative security questions. This week's alternative security questions are: number 1. If you could turn any object into a sentient companion, what would it be? Okay. Let's go with Sarah first.
Okay. So I decided to take this from what would be available in the world, like what object in general, like a refrigerator or a toaster. And what I would love to see turned into a sentient companion is a bathroom sink, because I was traveling recently and I would love a sink that would come out and be like, hey, you, wash your hands. Where are you going? Come back here. Because I cannot get over the number of people that still leave bathrooms without washing their hands. So I want a sink that's going to yell at people and tell them to get back here and wash their hands.
So less of a sentient companion and more of like a companion that you could leave in a place and like that would be okay.
You know, think about bartenders. You want to talk to bartenders. You know, people go to bathrooms to cry, have their moments. You know, you go to the bathroom and there's the sink is there waiting to talk to you, and it's also there to act as a reminder because please wash your hands. So that's what I thought of.
Okay. Rue,
Okay, here's the thing. All right. First of all, Sarah, your answer is borderline abusive. Okay. To have to anchor a sentient object in a static location that they can never leave is
I didn't think about it from that angle.
And then to just be like forced to just deal with people's filth as their main function is insane.
Now you make me feel horrible. Thanks, Rue.
it's just sentient sink abuse.
You better have a good answer.
So the right answer, I want my car to be sentient. It gets to go outside. It gets to go on adventures.
Talk about torture. Have you seen how humans drive these things? Oh my goodness.
Not me. I am an exceptional driver, and my car and I would become one in this beautiful union. So the answer is car. That's the right and only answer.
Your brand new car.
My brand new car, yes.
That you had to replace from your old car. So did you want that other one to be sentient?
Yeah.
As well?
The other one?
Right.
No, just the new one. I don't.
Yes, I was then thinking about that.
Because the old one died a horrible death. Like I wouldn't want to experience that.
I mean, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Let's go to the next question. What's the most useless thing that you're really good at? Let's go back to Rue.
The most useless thing that I'm really good at, I can make myself sneeze on command.
Really? I mean, we now need to experience this.
I don't want to do it right now, but I can. And it's useless.
You can't say something like that and then not do it.
I don't want to. I'm not in the mood to sneeze at the moment. Sorry.
By on demand, you meant when I feel the motion to do so.
Right. Yeah, I sneeze when my body wants to.
Yeah. And I sneeze when I want to.
Okay.
It's a little endorphin rush.
Sarah, what useless thing are you really good at?
All of it. I don't even know.
All of it. Okay. I think that's a brilliant answer to that question.
Like, Yeah, all of it is pretty useless. When I think about
Just everything useless you are really good at.
when I think about all the things I do, like most of them are pretty useless.
Okay, I love that as an answer. Okay, number 3. We're going to go back to you, Sarah, here. If you had to rename your Wi-Fi network to scare off neighbors, what would you call it?
Oh, this one was hard for me because most people don't even know what they're looking for. Probably something I would go really dark and be like, Abe's heart monitor.
That's really good. Damn it. I'm annoyed with how good that is.
Yeah, that is pretty good.
Damn it.
Sorry, Rue.
No, I don't apologize. When you hit a banger that hard, like that's no need to apologize. That's fantastic. I was gonna go with something like I always like some of the good ones. Like there's always there's a few that sort of pop up that are fun. So if I had to pick, I think I would probably go with like FBI surveillance van. Like I think that would be a good one.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm awarding all the points to Sarah this week.
Smart.
I'm sorry, Rue, but
No.
the weird sentient sync, the being useless at everything, but really good at those useless things, and renaming your Wi-Fi to someone's heart monitor, I think is brilliant. So, all the points.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Yay! See it. Most useless thing I'm really good at. Done.
All right, I've got to go and I've got to prepare for the next All Hands.
All right.
So, love you both.
It's going to be wonderful. You're going to be amazing.
Love you both.
Love you both.
Love you both. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also leave us a rating or review. It's one of the best ways to support Random but Memorable, and we always love reading your feedback. We're also a community-led podcast, so if you have any questions for us, topic requests, or even guests you'd like to hear from, please send us an email at podcast@onepassword.com. We read all of your comments and look forward to hearing from you. We hope you'll join us for the next episode with plenty more random moments in the wide world of cybersecurity.